let's get 2 to 3 reflections. Did you discover anything new? Yeah, in the back.
I think I just discovered like it's pretty complicated. When I was talking with my partner, we were talking about like, oh, it was centralized at this point, and then things shifted and changed, and so there was like periods where things had like shifted on the spectrum, and it wasn't as like cut and dry as I had initially like thought.
Who resonates with that? Who felt like it was more complex? Yeah. Great. Let's take 2 more.
I think both my partner and I are in similar types of points where we're definitely shifting from one type of organization to another, and both of us had questions of sustainability and what it means to be both decentralized and at a certain scale.
Great. Questions of sustainability. Yeah, Greta.
I've been in a number of situations in which we think that when we're starting out we're going to be centralized and then we're going to decentralize later. So I'm like in the beginning of a project that definitely like thinks that that's going to happen. So.
Great. Love the subtlety of the implication.
I've just experienced like pitching the idea of decentralization and like distributed power and control brings up a lot of fear for people of like, what if people make bad decisions? What if people aren't very smart? What if this goes wrong? So there's like a fear of letting go.
Who feels that fear? In yourself or in your organization? Probably all of us. I know I really do. Totally. Great. So next slide. So we're about to say and go back to the spectrum and say, where do we actually want to go? Whew. Question of the hour, right? Where do we want our organizations to be in an ideal world? But before we do that, I just want to say that actually there's no value judgment on where your organization lies on this spectrum or where you want it to lie. That actually, just like, who was just saying this? That it's more complicated. I can't find you now. Great, what's your name? Christina, great. Just like Christina was saying, and Greta also, like, we might start here and want to move here or not move here or actually move here. We might be here and then end up here or later. Like, all of our organizations are living, right? And so I want to just tell a quick story about the organization that I currently work for, If Not Now. So If Not Now started in the summer of 2014, which was the latest military operation in Gaza, Operation Protective Edge. And it came to meet a need in the Jewish community of tons and tons of despair, right? So if you talk to a lot of people who are there at the sort of founding of this organization, they talk about just waking up every day to read the news of thousands of people being killed in their name. Thousands of Palestinians, mostly, being killed in the name of Jews, right? And so they started doing these actions outside of the offices of major Jewish institutions, all of which were supporting the war. And the actions were just really simple. They were just simple mourners Kaddish, which is the Jewish ceremony of mourning, actions where they mourned the deaths of both the Israelis and Palestinians that had died. These actions spread like wildfire all across the country. The brand of If Not Now started getting picked up in Chicago, in New Orleans, in San Francisco, in Toronto, right? And people all over started calling themselves If Not Now, and they had a ton of autonomy. Really, there was no expectations and rules about what bound them as If Not Now, except like 3 things. That you call yourself If Not Now, and that you have these 3 demands, all of which are totally abstract, which were, where's Tammy? Which were?
Against the occupation, freedom and dignity for all, and end the war in Gaza.
Right. So as long as you said those are your 3 demands and you had the name If Not Now, you were part of If Not Now. And after the momentum of the war had ended, there was all of this confusion about, and just disagreement, right, about where people wanted to go, right? They were like, we should go in this direction. Some people were like, we should go in this direction. If Not Now in Boston was taking meetings with their local Jewish institution who was saying, we'll negotiate with you if X, Y, and Z. Amazing. Helen was a part of that. If Not Now in San Francisco had a totally different strategy, right? And there was just nothing binding these 2 together. And so what happened is that a group of people in New York decided to totally centralize. They were like, We are afraid that this is going to get out of control. We see the enormous amount of potential of this movement to activate young Jews, and also it can't happen if we keep doing it this way. It's going to get toxic. It's going to get unhealthy. Was that easy? No. Tammy? No. Did it cause a ton of pain? Yes. It was a really painful process. And then this group spent, and with the help of so many others, Tammy and Helen included, basically came together in this super centralized process to design a decentralized organization that now is starting to decentralize again. So we went totally to this end of the spectrum and are now starting to decentralize and give people way more autonomy within a tighter set of boundaries than we could at the beginning. So I just want to use this example to show that actually our organizations might need totally different things at totally different moments, right? Next slide. I think of it as like a sea anemone. Is anyone from the West Coast here? So all my ocean metaphors will ring truer to you than they will to other people in the room. But what happens when you touch a sea anemone? So a sea anemone is this weird little sea creature that lives in really shallow oceanic waters. What happens when you touch a sea anemone? Yeah, thank you, Evan. That was beautiful animation. It goes in, right? It tightens, it closes, right? And so I think that it's kind of a beautiful metaphor for organizations in that it's open, like this might be a sort of decentralized, autonomous organization, and when something happens to disturb its atmosphere, it sucks in, it centralizes, right, to protect itself. It's a protective mechanism. Amazing. About the sea anemone. Can you wait till the end of my metaphor? Okay, great, thanks. So yeah, it closes to protect itself, and our organizations might be similar. And I find that actually people, because of the fear of decentralization, in moments where our organizations are under a lot of stress or there's issues in our atmosphere, the tendency is to want to centralize. And sometimes that's actually probably a good thing, right, is to centralize our organizations to protect ourselves. And when there's potential and possibility, open, calm waters, they can then open back up. Now I will love to take your
I'm
question.
confused by that because in the chapter of the starfish and the spider, it was talking about how one of the great strengths of decentralized organizations is that when they are attacked, they become more decentralized. So I'm wondering if that desire to centralize out of fear is actually strength, or if that is reverting to an old cultural pattern, or I'm just wondering about that.
Well, you just totally poked holes in my fucking ocean metaphor, so you're right. You're totally right. That actually this might be not a perfect organism, right? Actually, this might not be a perfect decentralized organism. The starfish might be a perfect decentralized organism of the sea. But this might be a better metaphor because the reality is that a lot of our organizations aren't perfect. It's just how it goes.
Our question is the possibility of doing both as an organism, because we all live as an entity and we're all breathing, and so it works best when you I think go there, because if we talk about memory, we go back to something we know to figure it out, to blossom again, to create another memory.
Beautiful. Yeah, totally. This is all about.
Yeah.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, am I on mute? Oh, sorry. This thing. How many of you love control? Control. You love control. Raise your hand. If you love control, be honest. Love control. Don't lie to me. Is that true or not? Why the heck are you here? Are there multiple reasons, emotional, cognitive, of why people decentralize or centralize? Yes or no? Yes. Is centralized, which one is right? Decentralized or centralized? Neither. But are they dynamics that happen? Yes or no? Yes. Different reasons why organisms or us, some of us want to feel protected, some of us don't care about that and are like, who cares? Are you following me on this? What the book, how many read the first chapter? Oh, this is awesome. Yes. Can we give a round of applause to the readers? What the book is saying is trying to demystify the myth of the fear. Are you following me on this? Because to decentralize is because in our culture of control, yes or no? Do we have a culture of control? Well, not woo, but
Yes.
we don't like that stuff. But no, agreement. Okay, good. Thank you for the clarification. But in our culture of control, for us to decentralize feels counterintuitive. So what actually saying is that what the book is saying is actually when the swarm gets attacked, right? Actually, more people rise up to that. Is this making some sense? But now that is more level 2. You're just 2 ahead. That's the problem with you. You're good. Okay, Emily, I'm sorry. Was that okay?
Totally.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add is that the starfish, what's so amazing about it is that it contains all of its DNA in every part of the organization. And often when we centralize, it's because of fear that actually people on the fringes or people in our networks won't know enough, right? Won't make the right choices, won't make the right judgment, right? And so it's fear that actually not every part of the organization has what it needs to know. And so that might be a dynamic that we can also think about later. Cool. Okay, so we're going to stand back up. I know I'm asking you to move a lot. And we're going to stand where we want. Don't go yet. Stand where we want our organizations to be in 6 months. And then we're going to stand where we want our organizations to be in 2 years. Okay, time for some key insights. So what are some key insights that you're getting from standing in different places, imagining what your organization could be like in 6 months or 2 years? Let's take about 4.
I didn't move very much in between where we are and where I think we need to head, and I think that we can have the same balance between decentralization and centralization, but do it a lot more effectively by understanding that dynamic. And it's right now we've got some centralization and some decentralization, so I was standing in kind of the mean, the average between them, and I think like creating the feedback systems and structures that like bring the strengths of balance.
What's your name?
Henry?
Henry. Thank you, Henry. Let's get
I was not so much here, but I was sort of just walking around just thinking. The way I see it, I see the sort of spectrum of decentralization and fully centralized, but I see that as just changing and shifting dependent on the organization needs. I feel part of it is that, let's say I have one organization, so I work as cooperative. That cooperative is going to need other necessities. So if there's other organizations that are as well decentralized, that work as cooperative, it would change. So I feel part of it is, let's say if there's a protest on, I believe it was Lissy was talking about 2008, the war in Iraq, that there was about like 200, 300,000 people like protested out in New York, but then in other places in the country it was like 1.2, so it was a much larger population. And I feel like that is sort of how I see a decentralized network work in a sense. So I don't see it being like completely fixed in one position, but it's a spectrum that's reacting into its environment.
Thank you, Alex.
Great. That's cool. So I also didn't move very much, but part of that was because I was trying to figure out how I would define like what are the borders of my organization versus like relationships to different entities that maybe like identify with the organization or are part of movements that have the same goals as my organization. And so like I could imagine pieces, like say if my organization decided that we wanted to do like a total shift in our structure or strategy, the people who consider themselves part of the organization now might not, and new people would. And like some pieces of the future or past pieces of the organization might end up on that end of the spectrum as the strategy shifts from the centralized piece.
Totally. So actually whole new organizations might be created or as fallout or
It's like
or whatever.
how much control do we want to retain?
Totally.
Yeah, I was thinking about like new projects, new movements, and wanting to, in my opinion, get to a place where you had this sort of decentralized organization with centralized design. But thinking about 6 months and even really thinking about 2 years, it seemed unlikely that we would have enough momentum to like really have a decentralized organization yet, because there just wouldn't be that many people into it yet. And so for that reason, I was closer to the like still having a lot of centralized command in order to create the conditions under which we could later be decentralized.
How many of you, just want to get a raise of hands, how many of you feel like you want to centralize your organizations at this particular moment? Raise your hands. Okay, I have a couple people. How many of you feel like you want to decentralize your organization? Raise your hand. Beautiful. How many of you feel like there's a lot of dynamics and details that are going to take in order to do that? Yes or no? How many of you feel like you're going to be jumping from one to the other, or maybe a jump here or there, but it's going to take some time? Yes or no? How many of you feel that way? Perfect. How many of you are feeling like you want to move towards being centralized command with decentralized components? Raise your hand. I just want to take a survey. Excellent. Okay, centralized command with centralized components. Okay, great. How many of you want to move to decentralized organization with centralized design? Raise your hand. Okay, perfect. We have a lot of people in the room. That's awesome. How many of you want to move to decentralized organization with decentralized design? Okay, a few are thinking about it. That's great. There's a lot of different processes to go about this. Deep breaths, everybody, deep breaths. Again, if you don't breathe, we're going to have problems. So do you think this is complex, yes or no? Yeah. Excellent. So if we want to summarize a lot of things, we think that there is two major qualities, ingredients about that we want to figure out how to do in decentralized organization. Okay? Can you say autonomy? Autonomy. First, we want to figure out how we can have high levels of autonomy in our organization. What does that mean? People's abilities to start projects without somebody having permission of them. Is this making some sense? Yeah. People able to take initiative, new things get started. People can coordinate without somebody in the center manifesting that or controlling all of that. Are you following me on this? High levels of autonomy. But has anybody has kids here? Children? Or nieces, nephews? What happens when you give way too much autonomy to little kids? Right? Things could go wrong. Yes or no? Yes. What happens when they give too autonomy to adults? Can something go wrong too? Yes or no? Even worse, right? Way too much autonomy. So the other thing that we're trying to get is high amounts of unity. Can you say unity with me? Unity. What we mean by unity is the ability for whatever's within the organization. So if this is one group in the organization, there's another group in the organization, that these two groups are not fighting and eating each other up. Are you following me on this? Like Emily was mentioning Occupy, and that the groups had different forms of functioning, like General Assembly, some didn't, right? What we mean by unity is not necessarily that all the groups are doing the same thing. What we mean by unity is that those groups are not eating each other up. Who has seen people eat each other up in organizations? Woo! Great. This is not story time. This is not story time. Okay, so we're trying to figure out how do we have high amounts of autonomy and high amounts of unity. This is what we're thinking in our design. In the next module with James and myself, we're going to try to go a little deeper into this. Is that okay? There's like a million decisions to take for all this. Because you give autonomy and you lose some unity sometimes. Is that true or not? Backwards. Okay, give me another click, Lizzie. Let's finish this thing. This training is a lot about this part of the spectrum, okay? We're really focused in figuring out how can we have decentralized organizations with centralized design, right? And also thinking about the components, because I know there's a lot of you that still will have a centralized command. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Some of you might want to still have that, right? But have a lot of decentralized components, as somebody was saying that's happening in many ways in the Bernie campaign. Is that okay? So we're trying to give you tools to get into those spectrums. One more click, please. Okay. Deep breaths, everybody. Deep breaths, deep breaths. We talked about, how many of you feel like you're beginning to understand a little bit about decentralized organizations? Raise your hand. See, great. How many of you feel like you have 20 million more questions? Great, perfect. That's 20 million. Okay, good. The next thing that we're going to talk about more tomorrow, but I want to explain this, is the design part. Because we said that we're focusing on this design movements thing. Okay? Give me one more click, Lizzie. This process of design we call front loading. Okay? There's a lot of ways to design an organization. Yes or no? But we are recommending one specific process, which is called front-loading, right? The word says it's front-loading. And the reason why we call this front-loading is because, another click, let's see, we believe that organizations have a DNA, have a code, a source code, a set of information, a set of elements. And that DNA is what gets replicated. In some ways, some people also call this organizational culture, but it's all the set of processes, the structure that the organization has. Are you following me on this? Even if they're implicit or explicit. How many of your organizations have DNA? Raise your hands. You have explicit or implicit norms, agreements, structures, yes or no? Right? So what we are saying is that if your organization or movement has DNA, how can you go in through a process when you analyze what that DNA is, what is missing, how can you remake it, as Emily was talking about in the context of FNAT now, right? And think about what are all the elements needed for that. Are you following me on this? That is what we call front-loading. I'm part of a movement called Cosecha or Harvest, which my team is here. And we spent, with Fatima here, almost 2 years designing the DNA for what we think is going to be, we're not ready there yet, but a full decentralized organization that is going to produce a general strike in this country in 20 months. So we still have some time. Follow me on this? Took us 2 years to think through that. Are you following me on this? It might take you less, I hope. But just this whole process about what is and what are the scenarios and all this stuff. Are you following me on this? What are the diseases that might emerge? Is that true or not? Within the organization or outside of the organization. What happens if there is violence, if there's repression? Can we go one back, Lizzie, please? So what front-loading we mean is that there is this very big myth about decentralized organization. And the myth is that there is no structure. Who has heard this before? There's no structure. But actually what we think is that there's always structure. Let's just put it that way. Is that true or not? There's always some kind of formality, norms of society, different power. There is always something going on, okay? It's just not explicit. But actually what we believe is that in order to decentralize with the most strength, the most health, the most complexity, you need to add way more structure. And that your structure has to be super duper duper what? Explicit. Okay? And this process of front-loading is us thinking through that. So how do we develop a structure that can allow high levels of autonomy within boundaries, right? And how can also give a lot of unity, right? So we're thinking about rules, procedures, visions, all that stuff established at that beginning so that you can have that resiliency, okay? Now, this process of front-loading is something that we learned from some Serbian revolutionaries that overthrew their dictator in the late 90s, called the movement called Otpor. Has anybody heard of Otpor? Okay, we learned it from them. They took about 11 months to pull their general strike. We took 2 years. We're a little slower. But this is what we learned from them. We are trying it out. We're living it. We're experimenting. Can you re-front-load an organization? We think you can. I haven't done it myself particularly. But we think the realm of experiments are huge. Are you following me on this? So I also just don't want to say, this is the way, the only way. It is not. There's many ways. We're just proposing a couple. Is that okay? And if you come up with a better way, please, it will save us so much time. Is that okay? Okay, deep breaths, everybody. Deep breaths, deep breaths, deep breaths. One more, Lizzie, please. One more. Okay. The elements of the DNA, you can have tons of elements. Fatima, how many elements do we have in the Cosecha DNA? It's so many, right? So many little things that now we don't even perceive, but there are so many things, okay? But just for you to make it easier, you can put it on 3 buckets. Now, these are our buckets. You can make your own buckets if you want. But can somebody say story? Story. You can think about this, the narrative of the organization, the way, the identity of the organization, or the multiple identities of the organization. Can somebody say strategy? Strategy. Where are we going? What is our objective? What is our theory of change? Do we have multiple theories of change? You can go crazy. Okay? And the last one, can somebody say structure? Structure. Structure. Great. What we're focusing a lot on this training is this part right here. The structure. Okay? There are other great training institutes that we love, like Center for Story-Based Strategy, that do a lot of work on story. You know, how many people have been to Momentum or heard of the Momentum training? Rock and Roll, you can go there for strategy, or there's many other places that can do that thinking as well, right? So there's a lot of different elements of the DNA. So when we say that, I just want you to know that we're talking specifically around what? Structure. A structure. Okay, so deep breaths, everybody. Deep breaths. Okay, one more click, Lizzie. Okay. We're about to end this session and give you a rec. Is that okay? How many people are lucky that we're pushing through? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, deep breaths, everybody, deep breaths. How many of you are learning something? Raise your hand. Great. If you're not learning something, please shake them up or something. They got something going on here. So what we want to know is I want you to talk to the person left and right, and please sit down with some energy right now in your chair. Sitting with some energy in your chair. Sitting with some energy. Great. Please, sitting with some energy. Great, 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 great. And shake your booty a little bit. Shake your booty a little. Excellent, excellent. Some people shaking very well. Perfect. So what we want you to talk to the person left and right is, first, what are some revelations you're having? Okay? What are some revelations you're having? And remember, we're a learning community, so what you might learn might be the breakthrough of the other person. So share with them, okay? So what are the revelations? And then what are the 1 to 2 major questions that you're having? Just write them down. Is that useful? Let's take 2 to 3 minutes and let's talk in pairs. Go now. Go, go, go. And what we're going to do is just a list of the revelations people are having and a list of questions. Is that okay? We're not going to answer the questions. Is that okay? Yes. But we're going to take them and we're going to try to answer them through the training. Thank you so much, Helen. So first of all, let's start with what are some of the insights. Let's start with some of the insights.
That organizations can be shifted down from centralized to decentralized at different points.
That organizations can be shifted.
Can be shifted depending on the needs.
Depending on the needs. If you resonate with any relation, please snap. So that person might be like, ooh. What else? What else? Yes?
An organization can at the same time hold multiple places on the spectrum.
An organization at the same time can hold different, multiple places on the spectrum. Yes.
There are a lot of other examples that I didn't realize of organizations that are decentralized with centralized design or something like that. And there are also a lot more people working on this than.
Thank you.
It makes me think about the replication of DNA, but how do we start with a basis, but if we don't do the same exact thing, we recreate something new. Like, and I'm an artist, so it makes me think about like art as a way of like internal laws of African dance when they're talking about we have to master the step or we have to master the structure to get it to a specific way so that we can use improvisation and innovation and creativity and discovery to so that we can be at a decentralized space, but we can always come back to that foundation because the steps we had, like repetition, we have that amount of thing that is there. I don't know.
Hey, man. How many felt that? Hey. Thank you. That was. I can translate, but I don't know if I'm going to do justice. But thank you. Others? Yes.
Just like the balance that you're trying to strike when you have something that's more decentralized, right? Because you want structure, right? But you also don't want it to be too rigid, so that people can't sort of go out and be able to sort of have your platform to go do whatever. So like the importance of sort of trying to strike that balance for whatever you're trying to do.
Balance between unity and autonomy. Others.
Eli. Decentralization involves like a huge amount of commitment from a good, very dedicated group of people.
I just want to repeat because what you're saying is the golden key of this gathering. That decentralization requires a huge amount of commitment from a group of people. Huge. Thank you. Bless you. Bless you. Salud. Any others? Any others? Let's get another person. Any others? Deep breaths, everybody. High five. Say questions to the other person. Say questions. Questions.
I got you.
Okay, so let's do some questions. Deep breaths, everybody. Deep breaths.
If you're seeking to sort of shift or change, how do you handle like what exists already, and where does it fit into where you're going?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it was similar, but just seeing like the process of front loading that, if not now, took on required abandoning the base. I'm curious what the process looked like for Cosecha, And like if front loading kind of does require that a bit of that sacrifice and a really tough decision of like, do you have to abandon the base to a certain extent in order to do it?
Thank you for the question. Just also to add, on Sunday we have a whole hour and a half on just front loading process.
Okay.
Just also to share that. But thank you, that's a great question. Let's go to this side for a second.
Yeah, question for me is thinking about decentralization and like structure building and how to build structures that like part of the DNA might be supporting multiple strategies and like weaving between different strategies. Yeah.
Good. The golden key. Yes.
Two questions that are related. One is, does technology rob us of our own human intuition to connect in the kind of superorganism and collective consciousness, and it actually atrophies us instead of increases decentralization? The second question is, can we have memory go back further than this brief age of digital, which is only 20 years, to movements like the abolitionist movement, which were massive to totally change society, and none of it had any of this stuff? Can we remember that far back?
Thank you. Is that a good question, yes or no? In my culture, we're trying to go at least 10,000 years back. So I just want to say I resonate. Also just want to say, because I think you brought up a great point before, we are not saying that we love, that we're like technology, we love you, and capitalism, thank you for bringing us in. No. Does anybody love it? Okay, I just want to say we don't. And we're not equating that is what's generating decentralization. I just want to say from our perspective. But I just want to honor him. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ethan? Okay, let's get a couple more questions. We got to go to, okay, let's see. Boom. Okay, I'm trying to feel the people that haven't talked. I'm sorry.
I'm curious about whether you actually don't have value judgments as to centralization.
Like if we do?
Yeah, because it feels like there is one, but then we keep talking about how there isn't.
I can tell you how I feel, but that doesn't necessarily mean how the whole team feels. To be honest with you, my personal, not the team's, is that okay? My personal thinking is what I want me is more fluidity. Is that there are times when centralization is important. This is what I think. There are times when there's certain things that need to come together and reinform. Maybe not through violence or other means. But there's also, we live in a time of so much centralization that people are being robbed of who they are and their autonomy as humans. That's what I think, right? But it's because I think it's contextual. Our training is not saying, do this way secretly. No, we're just recommending one path that we are experimented with, but we're actually quite open in what we think. Greta, thank you for your question. And you should talk to all of us. We all have disagreements. Is that a beautiful thing or not? So I just want to put it out there. Tammy.
Can you actually decentralize from being centralized?
Wait, say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Can you actually decentralize from a place of being centralized?
Yes, that's a great question. Can you decentralize from a place of centralized? Thank you.
I'm really wondering about, I can see how a decentralized movement can just fire once it's going, but like what is the spark that would first get things started? And, is it jumping on like some external event? Can we create that event? What is that?
We'll answer that question later.
Cool.
So I sort of stumbled into this idea of cooperative houses being like prototypes for how to design society, and then I think they tend to have this like decentralized format because we're all like everybody's voice matters, and I'm wondering about the scale of that. Like how large can you be and be decentralized? So if a cooperative house is a prototype for society, like what about a city? Can an entire city be decentralized? What about a country?
Yes. How many of you are asking the scale question? How many of you are here because that's something that you particularly want to think about engaging thousands of people? Okay, this is good. Okay, we might have to shift the agenda a little bit to address some of that because there's some strategies. Yes.
I guess the question is it possible to have like a membership for the people who are organized in a decentralized way?
Okay, good. So does that address membership?
Question is like, where is the community? This is sort of a scale question, but like, where's the community inside of a decentralized structure, and like, what are the denominations of like relationships inside of that?
Thank you. Let's take a deep breath, everybody. How many of you feel like we're coming up with some very good questions? Okay, we're going to do something that we in Peru do, this ancient tradition. So put your hand up like this, like this, like this, like this, and go here and say, good job.